What is an executor? Well, when a person passes away, they leave an estate. That's all of their assets, their belongings, the stuff of their life. They leave that behind. And the executor is the person that manages that estate. It was a person named in the will, and they have to abide by the wishes of the deceased person, the testator, the person that has named them and entrusted them to be their executor. There's at least 3 phases of being an executor. The first one is to take the will. You're an executor if you're named in the will. You're an executor if there is a will. Well, that will has to be probated. So the executor takes the will and probates it. That's the act of satisfying the surrogate's court. Maybe other states call it probate court, but in New York, we call it the surrogate's court. And you have to satisfy that court and the law that governs estates, state probate trust law, EPTL, the SCPA, Surrogates Court Procedure Act. Take the will, probate. That means following the rules of the court, getting bonded perhaps, ultimately getting, well, it's ultimately, but it's early in the process, the petition, affidavits, sworn statements, serve all of the heirs, the deceased person, comply with that court process. And at the end of that court process, although at the beginning of the estate, the end of the process is obtaining letters testamentary. That's your permission slip. That's your power of attorney for the estate. That gives you your permission and authority to go to phase 2, marshal assets. Now, you could have started while you were still waiting for the court, but you wouldn't have had the authority to marshal. Take a look. Are there bank accounts? Is there property? Are there brokerage accounts? What are the assets? Was there a house or an apartment that needs to be taken care of in some way, distributed in some way? The will might say, I'd like to give the sum of $5,000 to this person and $10,000 to this charity. And then I want to give this child 20%, that child 20%. Then the other 60% is going to be distributed in this fashion. So that's the role of the executor. You're a proposed executor in the will. And only upon the court conferring that upon you with letters testamentary, then you become the executor. Then you have the power to marshal and distribute. Then ultimately you have to submit back to the court like receipts, proof of what you've done. They're not called receipts, but proof that you have paid taxes, paid estate expenses, and distributed the assets pursuant to the way the will wanted to do it. Now, there could be some overlap between phase 1 and phase 2, as I'm describing it, because if a person passed away and you're the proposed executor in a will, but they have a house and there are payments to be made, taxes, insurance, water, utilities. Let's say you're in the middle of the winter. You have to have heat so that pipes don't burst, right? And you safeguard the asset. So you might need to seek more immediate relief of the court and permission to become, a temporary take charge type person of the estate, right? So otherwise, those are the phases. And that's what an executor is. They're the person, the decedent, and while they were alive when they made the will, that's the person that you trusted to take care of your affairs.